Okay, I think we're live. Greetings to the folk in live YouTube land here with Eva.
Oh, hello.
So we'll do a little bit of a warm up. As I said,
Yeah.
besides doing this live thing, we will be using this for forthcoming podcast as well.
And
So
we're trying something new with the microphone because I think it's my end. I really think it is. It's the dodgy computer I'm using and the mic. So I've put on a little, headset here. I look like I'm working for Telstra or something. And we're going to see if that works a little bit better, even though I kind of look like a pilot. But that's all good. Yeah. But I don't know if it'll work and if it'll make the sound any better. We'll give it a try. If not, then we'll just go back to what we were
yeah,
using before.
your captain today is Eva. Please put your hand
Keep
luggage in the
all
overhead
hands
compartment.
and feet inside the ride, and we'll take you on an adventure.
All right, and as I've been saying to the people in the chat, this is not like my normal live chat where I actively interact with the chat because we're going to use this for a podcast, and looking at chat would be sort of too disjointed and not make any sense to anyone listening to audio only in the future. So don't feel sad if I don't react to chat like I normally do. But by the same token, if someone puts something particularly pertinent in, I will draw it to Eva's attention. And having said that, I'm going to give 2 seconds silence and then do the lead in for the podcast. Are you ready to go, Eva?
I'm ready to go. Roger, Roger.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm here today with the fabulous Eva again. Hello.
Hello.
So we were tossing back and forth messages on what to talk about today. And admittedly, not a problem because we could talk about literally nothing and keep going for ages.
Yes, as has been proven by our last few recordings.
But starting with at least some sort of thread seemed like a reasonable idea. And I was thinking along the lines of a lot of what we used to talk about when Eva was living in Melbourne and we made videos semi regularly. We'd often talk about relationships and intimacy and advice and good and bad things to do. And I thought we could do a little bit of that today.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny these days. It's like the starting point for weird stories about relationships and where people get advice. There are various subreddits. For those who aren't familiar with the website reddit.com, people can set up discussion pages on pretty much anything, and everyone can post and vote on things and what's popular and whatnot. And there are many the individual pages they call subreddits that are dedicated to various aspects of interpersonal relationships, and by jings they get some weird ones. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, either if without looking at it, if I asked you, what's the weirdest thing either you've ever experienced or anyone's ever asked you for advice on, and you had somewhat of a problem believing this was a real situation, what springs to mind?
Um, oh, look, gosh, there's quite a lot. I had one guy message me a long time ago about what to do because his girlfriend kept because she thought he was cheating on her. She would put Tabasco sauce in his lubricant, so that it would sort of, if he did happen to cheat on her with somebody else, it would, cause upset and, and awful things. And all it really did was burn him whenever he wanted to have a wank, because he wasn't cheating on her. And I found that sort of, I was like, couldn't see the her point in a way. I'm like, I get the whole sort of wanting to find out if your partner's cheating, and I get the whole anger that might come from it. But that just seemed counterproductive to me because it's not like he would say, oh, by the way, my bit on the sides got burnt bits because of you. Like and it's incredibly dangerous to put anything in like that inside lubricant without anybody's consent. But there were a lot of things like that, the way that people would try and catch their partners out from cheating or infidelities. And I used to think that, to me, if you are in that situation, and if you are, I guess, often there are red flags for a reason, and whether or not that reason itself ends up being the exact thing you thought it was going to be, there is a reason you either think this or they are acting that way. And sometimes it can be your own projections and your own paranoias and your own indiscretions that are leading you to think that somebody else is. And sometimes they are being indiscreet or unfaithful in some way, regardless of whether it's a sexual way. But yeah, I've always just thought that going about it the sneaky ways or hiring private investigators or all that, I think it's a waste of time. I just think just ask and do your own dirty work as well. But yeah, I think when paranoia and jealousy and things come into a relationship, and especially in a way that gets you manifesting things like that, then there's a problem anyway. Yeah.
So, okay, that raises an interesting one to me. I think probably everyone's been on one side of that fence at some stage in their life. Either a partner is accusing you of cheating and doing weird things to try and catch you out, or you're reasonably sure your partner is cheating and you want to catch them
Yeah,
out.
and look, quite often it's a double act. My ex used to accuse me of cheating all the time, and the weird thing was I didn't have time to or space to, because he was constantly there and sort of, to the point where he would drive me to work because of all the people I might fuck on that 20-minute walk from my house to the place where I worked, and things like that. And it turned out, of course, that he was cheating on me, and he was sort of projecting all that sort of stuff onto me, I think, as a way to kind of, either sort of make himself feel better about it, or to try and throw the blame off, or the the suspicion off, or just the fact that if you are a sort of sly, sneaky person, then you usually kind of suspect that other people are sly and sneaky around you. It's like, I mean, I've got the opposite. I'm quite a trusting and loyal person, so I expect and believe that most people in my world are trusting and loyal, and I think they are now. But it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out how to deal with the fact that I think that everybody's as honest as I am, and they're really not. But yeah.
What would your general advice be if, okay, you thought your partner was cheating, you didn't have anything concrete, so you just said to them, I think there's something up, uh, and they say, no, there isn't, and you still don't believe them? I mean, does that mean you should just be out of that relationship because you can't trust them, or what?
Oh, it's tricky, isn't it? I think that there is a part. It comes to a point where what's the point if you're just paranoid and frightened and worried and scared, and you're losing your trust in somebody. I don't know if I see the point of a relationship in that sense, but I also know how hard it really is to extrapolate yourself from a relationship, especially one that's been going on for a long time. Um, I think that relationship, we sort of look at these, what would be your advice in this situation, but those situations are never just a one-off. They are the culmination of a lot of things and a lot of conversations that haven't been had, and so these sort of things, and I often talk about it in other cases when we talk about banning porn, or stopping the sex industry, or all these sort of things that people try and blame for certain things. It's shutting the door way after the horse has bolted, because if you've got to the stage in your relationship where you really don't trust them, and you really feel that they're cheating or lying or deception, hiding something from you, that's built up over something. That's there are conversations that need to be had, I think, about what sort of relationship you have, about what your boundaries are, about what your expectations are, long before this sort of happens. And in those situations where it does come out of the blue, because I do understand that there are situations where people think they are so much in love and you know, they've never had reason to doubt, and then something happens that makes them doubt, then, you know, to me there's a reason. And if they sort of turn around and say, well, no, nothing's going on, if it's the first time you've asked and the first thing, you know, maybe believe them. Maybe, you know, it's, you know, it's hard because people, once you've got that seed is there. And I don't often know if there's a lot of things that can really fix that if there's so much paranoia and jealousy around. And people are frightened to leave relationships for a lot of reasons. And the main one, and I've been having this discussion a lot with a few people about a bunch of things that are sort of, you know, happening in my world and in their worlds, is you feel, you know, we've always been told that relationships, you know, they're supposed to be lasting forever. Marriages are lasting forever. Everything is forever. And if they don't last, then you've failed, or you've not done it right. And I don't believe that necessarily. I think that, you know, with the exception of those sort of marriages or relationships that last until death, everything has an end. And sometimes it's about accepting that that has come to an end and it's time to move on to the next stage. As defeatist as that might sound, or as absolute as that might sound, I think we need to start giving people the permission to leave a toxic relationship, even if the toxicity is something that they're kind of just perceiving, if that makes sense. You know, I'm a bit of a fatalist in that sense, that I just think, what's the point if you're not happy and they're not happy, and there is obvious, you know, and these days you don't, you know, marriages and relationships aren't sort of bound by that sort of financial and security burden that they once were, especially for women. But I don't know. I think, you know, I might get a few hate letters for this, but I think, you know what, if you're not happy, then and there's not any way that you can become happy. I mean, there's always therapy and couples counselling and all that, but if you've got that seed, I think it's time for you to move on. Even just take a break. See if you can live apart. I don't know. Like, it's hard because, you know, I've been in some really toxic relationships, and I'm in a very long-term, long-lasting, very trusting, very honest and open relationship now. So I've been on both sides, and it's hard. Honestly, I don't quite have the answer to that, because every relationship's different, and every bit of whatever it is, evidence or paranoia that you have that comes to it, has come from somewhere. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how to answer that, because it's too broad, and each situation is far more individual than that.
I think that's a better answer than a really definitive black and white answer anyway, because
Yeah.
you can guide people, you can give people help and support, but I think it is important to acknowledge every situation is different, and a broad brush answer is not going to help everyone. It might help you think about things, but the idea that you can give a single definitive answer that's going to cover every possibility is a bit unrealistic.
Yeah, and I think that's the main problem I find when I write advice columns, is I only get a small window of the problem. And so I'll try and answer it as honestly and as openly as I can within what information and what evidence I have of what the situation is. But, you know, I've had situations in my own relationship or my own life where I've been struggling as to how I would deal with it. And I've sort of said at one stage, you know, if this was an advice letter I'd received from a reader or a fan or a, you know, somebody who follows my work, I could possibly have an answer to it. But when it's coming from my own head, I can't. And a friend suggested, why don't you write yourself a letter and answer that? And I was like, no, because I know that it's coming from me, and I know all the other stuff that's led to it that would need to be completely kind of dealt with and extrapolated from first before I get to that problem. So, you know, advice columns are all well and good, and I think that they do serve a purpose to a degree, but I also think that is such a small amount of information that people have when they're answering these things, that I don't think they can be taken too generally, too specifically, and need to be taken on a far more general level, which is why I balk sometimes when people call me a sexpert, because I'm not. I'm an expert in my own sex, and I'm an expert in certain theories and certain practices and certain things like that, but human interaction and human relationships and human emotions are so intricate and so involved that I don't think anyone can really truly be an expert on that sort of stuff at all. You're only speaking from your own experiences and your own sort of, and yes, I have the experience of other people's stories and other people's things, and I have, I've read a fuckload of shit, but it's still really, really individualized and can't really be sort of put down as an expertise, because it's far too broad.
Yeah, I was thinking what you're saying about, when a seed gets put in your head, life is complex. It actually made me think of probably the weirdest situation I found myself in once. Definitely the most toxic relationship I'd ever been in. This ex was far too late. There was a diagnosis that she was probably dealing with borderline personality disorder, and it had never been properly diagnosed, let alone treated. Or, incidentally, a little bit of trivia, although a lot of people know the term borderline personality disorder, in professional circles, that term's fallen out of favor, and professionals now tend to say complex PTSD, because
Right.
the condition that's been known as borderline personality disorder is almost always the result of trauma, abuse and trauma, and so it is a form of PTSD. But yeah, that's a little bit of side from thing. But yeah, anyway.
Because I don't work in mental health areas as I do in a sort of skidding over the top of what I do. Sense always comes into kind of behaviour and emotions and all that, but and I don't. I'm very blessed and lucky. I've not had any kind of mental illnesses in my own life, personally. So I don't know a lot about that sort of stuff. I would still call it BPD, or what were some of the others? Manic depression and all those terms that are sort of frowned upon now are. And are far more sort of understood, I think, in the medical field. It's not something I know a lot about.
Yeah, I thought it was a really strange term the first time I heard it, because it made it sound like the person almost has a personality disorder. It's a borderline, but it actually meant it's a borderline between depression and things like anxiety and even schizophrenia in some cases. It wasn't falling strictly into one camp or the other, and so they called it borderline, which is how I understood that term. But yeah, so this ex of mine, it can manifest in lots of different ways, but paranoia and neediness are one of them. And I think she'd read every bad advice column ever, like in Clio and Cosmo and shit, because she kept coming up with real stereotypes to me. Like, you said someone's name in your sleep last night. And I said, really? What name did I say? And she's, will you tell me? This is the idea of trusting
It's very similar to that, sort of try and lead you into admitting some kind of indiscretion.
And she would say she could see scratch marks on my back. And I'm like, what? Really? As I'm having wild sexy time somewhere and they're scratching my back up. And I'm like, no, not happening. No. And for ages, I just thought, God, you've been reading dumb advice columns. But at a later stage, actually talking to a professional is like, oh no, that entire pattern fits very much in the BPD column. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's why I had so much trouble there, because I didn't know what I was dealing with. And also the other person, she didn't know what she was dealing with either, which meant a solution basically wasn't going to happen. So yeah, sometimes I think most of us think like, if you've got really strong suspicions about someone, it's probably not completely unfounded. But there are other elements too.
Well, that's exactly what I mean about it being this sort of individualized thing, is that, you're right. If you're feeling, and that's the problem, isn't it? Is that with this sort of stigma that we have about mental health, people don't often go and talk to people or find out if they've got a problem, and it will escalate and manifest into this paranoias and delusions and anger and violence and all sorts of things that can really then affect every other aspect of your life and other people in your life. And so, you know, that's why it's really tricky to sort of, you know, give relationship advice to people when you don't know the whole story of the relationship. You know, I mean, that would be one of my first thoughts, in a sense, you know, would be, well, do you have paranoid delusions? But you can't ask that of somebody, because, and especially if they don't know or they're undiagnosed and they really don't think that their thoughts are paranoid. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? Is when you're crazy, you don't know you're crazy, or when you're, you know, stupid, you don't know you're stupid. When you're dead, you don't know you're dead. You know, all these sort of things. You know, you live within the world that you know, everything is normal to me. And if everything started going abnormal, I wouldn't think it was my head. You know, it would be everybody else was crazy. Everybody else is, because you're quite, you know, you've lived in your head for however many years you've been alive. You kind of trust it. And so if that's the thing that's telling you that somebody is cheating or somebody is, you know, doing something nefarious or against you, then you're going to believe it, because it's your head, and your head doesn't lie to you because it's you and it's who you are. So that's another big, I guess, unchecked sort of, you know, thing in these sort of, you know, advice column things. You know, I guess, you know, and it's hard because I also try and be quite general in my articles when I write this sort of stuff. And you always get somebody coming at you with a specific, which annoys me, especially in some of my things where they try and come at me with a gotcha, like, well, you know, like we were talking about a while ago with my articles on consent, you know, and I'll write something about how informed consent's really important. And suddenly someone will come in and go, well, in this specific situation, if this happens and this, then what happens, you know, and trying to kind of get you to, you know, trip up on what you've said about, you know, consent. And I think that's, you know, going back to the paranoia or jealousy or that sort of stuff, you don't know that you're being paranoid, because that's just how your head is. And I mean, you know, if you're lucky, you have people in your world that care and love and understand you and see these changes and say, maybe you should go and talk to someone, maybe you need some help. But not everybody has that in their life. But I think that's also going also on a very broad sort of, or, you know, broadly specifying a moment that could happen. But I still stick by my thing is, if you think there's something, and, you know, and even in that sense, if you think there's something going on, maybe there is, but maybe it's in your head, and then that's something else that's going on. So, you know, I think shit sort of makes you feel weird for a reason. If it's you, if it's them, can't tell you, because I'm not there and I'm not part of it. But there is probably something going on, but it could also just be a chemical screw up in your brain that might need to be fixed. I don't know. You put me on the spot. Oh, yeah, my gosh.
But of course, you know, and any discussion like this is complicated by one of the more common forms of non-violent abuse and manipulation is gaslighting, deliberately setting people up to go, no, that's not happening, you're crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And then that can sort of, you know, and that's a whole other side of abuse and a whole other side of paranoia. And that, you know, when it comes to relationships where they are built on a kind of gaslighting, abusive area, and that kind of slow denigration of your own thoughts and of what you think is real and what you think is actually happening. I mean, you know, and that's again really hard, you know, like I said earlier about trying to extrapolate yourself from an intricate relationship, especially if you've been abused and made to feel like you are less than, or that your thoughts are not your own, or that you know, I mean, it's so hard. It's really tricky to you know, and there are so many people out there that are in these sort of relationships that don't realize it. You know, we talk a lot about abusive relationships, but it's only really ever when it results in some kind of death or physical violence of a extreme sense that we really stop and talk about it in things like the media and on social media and stuff. But for every, you know, we were up to, I think, 29 or 26 women have been murdered as of, I think, yesterday. And that's only the ones that have actually been murdered. You know, when you think about it, I think the police are called to a domestic violence incident something like every 2 minutes. But because these don't end in murder, we kind of seem to forget about this whole, and you get the whole, well, you know, women are abusive too, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, they are, and they really can be, and that's not something that I'm going to argue about. But these kind of every single minute of the day incidents that are happening, that end in just the door being closed and no more sort of intervention or help until the next time it happens, and you know, until possibly this person is murdered. You know, I think it's really oh, I lost where I was going with that because I got suddenly all a bit depressive about violence. But that's what I'm saying. These kind of abusive relationships, they're happening so often, and so many people are within them and not even realizing they are, because we haven't been taught the signs of these sort of things in our education. You know, we're taught that if he pulls your hair, he likes you. If he calls you a bitch, it's just him showing signs of affection. And we're taught this from such an early age, and boys are taught this kind of thing too. Oh, you know, treat them mean, keep them keen, you know, play hard to get, act like you don't care. I mean, in that whole Stranger Things season 2, I think it is, when Steve with the hair becomes sort of babysitter to Dustin, and he's teaching him how to pick up chicks. And of course it's the 80s, and you know, you would think that, you know, the lessons would have changed a little bit, but he basically says, just act like you don't care. And the more you act like you don't care, or you don't want anything to do with them, the more that they'll come to you. And that's sort of what, you know, boys are taught, you know, taught that sort of thing, and girls are taught, oh, just, you know, he does, you know, just pursue it, and if he doesn't, you know, treat you well, that's what boys do, and he really loves you. And so we get into these sort of things from such an early age that when you're, you know, in this long-term relationship and it's been happening all of that time, plus that's what you were brought up to believe, that that's how it is. I mean, it's just impossible to kind of tell how many people are kind of living these existences and these relationships, and it's frightening. And so that sort of thing, telling someone, well, just leave, that's not going to happen there, because there are far more complex issues than just walking out the door, because that's the main thing that these people that treat people like that are banking on, is that they've got nowhere else to go, or they don't believe they've got anywhere else to go. They've got no one else to talk to. And I'm the only one that will listen to you, and I'm the only one. And, you know, and it's this kind of, you know, separation and isolation of all your friends and family. And it's really a really scary thing. And yeah, I think we need to really discuss these things in early sex ed and early relationship education, just to stop, because that horse bolting thing again.
Yeah, and another sort of sad and disturbing statistic is that statistically the most dangerous time for an abused person is if they decide to leave the abuser, or if they say they're leaving the abuser. You know, talking about the terrible statistics of domestic murders. It's mostly women. It does happen to a number of men as well, but it's mostly women getting murdered by a current or former partner. Yeah, they'll just leave them. Well, that's when you're most likely to be murdered, when you take the steps.
You or your children, and it's that punishment of you leaving. They'll punish you by hurting the children, and yeah, it's a frightening place. So, you know, that sort of rounds back to what I was sort of saying about giving advice and being an advice columnist and trying to offer relationship advice, is without all the stories. And a lot of the time people won't admit their own, that's what's happening either. They don't want to admit it. They can't admit it. They're too frightened to admit it. It's been beaten out of them. It's been gaslighted out of them. And so they really think, I'm the problem. I'm the issue. I'm the reason this is going south, and I need to fix it, and I need to stay to make sure that they're happy and that they don't feel, you know, I mean, it's a really scary, horrible place to be. I've been in similar, not violent situations, but definitely situations where I felt that everything that was going wrong in it was my fault, and if I left, it would be everything that went wrong would be my fault. And that's one of the reasons it took me so long to leave my last relationship. And you know, there's that also thing, you just, like I said, you know, if you feel like your relationship's over, you feel like you've failed, you feel like you've let people down, you feel like, you know, it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, that's what I was going to make that point there. That's in my own experience, circumstances where a relationship's gone south, even if it isn't abusive, even if it isn't awful, it's just this isn't working anymore. Taking that step can be really hard because yeah, even in the best of worlds, you tend to feel like a failure. You tend to feel like you've let people down, and why can't I make this work? Other people make things work. What's wrong with me? And there's not
Yeah.
necessarily anything wrong with you.
No, that's right. And, I think some of the hardest times to leave a relationship as well is when the relationship itself isn't necessarily a bad relationship. It's just over. And it's coming to that realization that it's over, but there's nothing particularly nasty that's happened, nothing particularly awful. You don't hate the person, you don't. Yeah, and they can be really hard. And you see these sort of relationships that have gone on for 30 or so years, and they're just bored, and they're bored of each other, and they don't talk, and they don't laugh, and they don't do anything. But it's, well, we're stuck in it now because it's a marriage, or it's, this is what it is now. And I get that it's hard to, I guess, just again extrapolate yourself from those. Sometimes the option of leaving is that sort of thing. Well, then you've got to work out the bank accounts and the house and who gets the cat, and may as well just stick it out. Doesn't matter. I've got a roof over my head, and we don't hate each other, and blah blah blah. Um, it's hard. The end of relationships is hard, no matter how it's ending. And sometimes that can be almost even harder. If you've got a reason to leave, he cheated, or she, threw my shit on the lawn, or whatever it is, that's an excuse, that's a reason, fine, it's over. But when it's over with no big bang, I think that can be equally as hard, because that's when you really feel like a failure, is like, well, where did the love go? Where did the passion and the excitement go? It's tricky.
Yeah, I feel like as we go deeper and deeper into this depressing pit we've wandered into,
I know. We were going to be talking about funny things. We had, oh dear, and yeah, sorry, I think I took it to the
I
dark
want to
place.
turn around, lighten a bit. Not that it's to belittle anything we've said, but you put a thought into my head that I think could lighten things a little bit. Like we've
Oh,
been
yeah.
talking about the end of relationships just then, but of course, if one ends at some point, you're hoping another one starts. I think this is a fun thing to talk about with relationships and advice and how you do it, how you start a new relationship. Because I'll put myself on the line and say, I suck at dating. Like I'm terrible.
I have never really dated. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I got into a relationship not long after high school. Um, and I just happened to kind of, fall into that one, just because the dude lived next door to me and ended up staying at my house. And then suddenly we were living together. And 4 years later, I was like, this is horrible. Went out of that one and almost immediately sort of moved in with one of my best friends. Because I kind of needed a place to stay, and they had a spare room at their house. And this was one of my best friends who I'd known since I was a kid. And he's my husband now. He's sitting outside playing on his phone, doing stuff. And that's been like, 30 odd years that we've known each other. And about, just over around 20 that we've been in a relationship together. So I don't know. And that's the hard thing, is I flirt, and I can flirt quite well, but I don't know. And because I'm married, and even though we've got a sort of open relationship, and we party and we play and we whatever, and I was a sex worker and all this sort of stuff that we kind of have in our world, I don't know how to, especially with women, because I'm quite proudly bisexual. But oh my God, my track record with women is terrible, because I can't tell if they're just being nice to me or if they're flirting back. And then by the time it gets to that stage where maybe something could have happened, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm exhausted, it's time to go home, and all we've done is sit around talking about Buffy all night. And it's just, and then 6 months later, when we become really, really, really close friends, too close that, so close that sex will never happen. It's like, that first night, oh my God, why didn't you say, and it just, and that is the story of my life when it comes to women. Like I have, I've had a few female partners in my time, and they have pretty much been because they have pursued me and gone and sort of hit me over the head with a fry pan of it and saying, no, I am flirting with you. If they don't say that, I don't know it. And I know it is meme territory here, because I see all the, the bi girl memes of I don't know who's flirting with me and who's just a friend, and it's like, oh, relatable, stop attacking me, all those kind of little meme comments that you make on things like that. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask advice on starting relationships.
I was talking about things about bi girls. Got a lot of online friends who are bi, lesbian, or trans, and I see those bi girls never know who's flirting with them things all the time,
Yeah.
and that actually makes me feel mildly better and go, oh my god, apparently I'm not the only
Yeah,
clueless
you're just a
person in
bi
the world.
girl. Who knew? The
I'm
other
secretly
sign,
a bi
well,
girl.
look, the other
That
sign of how
explains
you
so
know
much.
that you're bi is how you sit in a chair. Because I didn't realise this at all, but I was sitting in my chair the way I normally sit in my chair with my sort of, head back and my legs up on my couch. And one of my friends was like, "You're bi." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but what?" And she's like, "It's how you sit on the chair. The more vertical and or horizontal, your body gets, and vertical your legs get apparently, or how much you swing your legs over. So I cannot sit properly in a chair. Like right now I'm sitting, I've got one leg tucked under me, one knee up here, like I'm just all over the place. Like I cannot sit in a chair properly. So that I guess is the sign that, yeah, can't tell if a girl's flirting with me, can't sit in a chair properly. What are some of the other signs? I don't know. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, no, that I've seen that one as well. The can't sit and don't know what to do with your hands. I've heard that's
Yeah.
a big one as well. Don't
Yeah,
know
I
what to
never
do
know
with
what to
your
do with my
hands.
hands.
Must be bi. Yeah.
Especially when
Okay.
I'm dancing. I'm terrible at dancing because I'm like, okay, my legs are doing something, and then what do I do with my hands? And I turn into like young talent time jazz hands, and it's
Mm.
just it's embarrassing. So I don't
Well, I can't
regularly
dance,
dance.
but I think that's just because I'm a straight white man, and
Yeah.
no one expects me to be able to dance. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, just the worst. I'm literally that. I am that stereotype. I am terrible. But in dating, like I fortunately haven't had to date for more than 13 years. That's how long
Mm.
I've been with Mrs. Angry. But when I was dating, I was using the internet dating sites. Thankfully, predating psychopathic shit like Tinder. It was actually where you had to make a profile, and so Tinder terrifies me. The idea of using Tinder to meet people just seems the worst to me. The
Oh, I
swipe left,
know.
swipe right
People
shit.
ask me questions about Tinder and OkCupid, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I used RSVP back in the day, and I mean
And they're
that's
like, oh,
where.
but don't you work for like a dating website? Swipe and do and I don't know how any of it works. I don't even know what way you're supposed to swipe. Like I think if I was to be thrust into the dating world today, I I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably be that old, sad 42-year-old lady hanging out at a bar. Like, I don't know. I'd like to try speed dating, actually. I think that would be really fun. I would love to go on a speed dating just to check it out because everyone talks about what a shitty kind of thing it is. But I reckon like a little couple of minutes just to get to know. So I think I'd love to do that.
Now, I'll go out on a limb now. I would recommend speed dating. I've done it once or twice in my life, and it's fun. I mean, like I jokingly said, no, I managed to fit 6 months of rejection into one night, so that was good.
uh,
But even if that's what happens, even if you get nowhere, it's like you could, if your ego can handle it, you can look back and go, okay, I talked to a dozen people and they were all disastrous. What can I learn from that? I reckon speed dating's fun. Like even if it's a disaster, it's fun.
Well, I think that it will. One of the things I think that we have lost in the age of internet dating and chat sites is the art of conversation. And although we do that, conversation has changed, and I'm not denigrating. I love text conversations. Most of my conversations these days are via text. I'm not very often on the phone to people, and apart from I've got a different job now, but most of my life I've worked very solitarily, sitting on my own typing on a computer in my house. So the art of conversation and talking to people, I think that you would get from that sort of speed dating thing. I think I think it would be kind of good for people who are feeling socially awkward and socially anxious because as surprising as this may sound, dear viewers, I'm incredibly socially awkward for a lot of the time, and I have to psych myself up greatly to talk on the phone or go to somewhere where I'm not going to know people and I'm going to be expected to speak to people. And I find it incredibly challenging. And, and someone said to me recently, I was talking about something else, and they said, you are what we would refer to in the psychology field or whatever field that she was in, I think psychology or fucking something, as an introverted extrovert, which basically means I just put on my extrovertness to hide the fact that I'm incredibly insecure. And I'm like, you know what, actually that fits. That's my new star sign. Like I really do. And I think that speed dating would help that, or not even, and why does it have to be dating? Can't we just set up speed conversations? Like you go out, it's not with the intention to meet someone in a romantic sense, but to meet new people, new friends, new interests, new whatever. I think it was something that I struggled with and still struggle with when I moved up here to Queensland, was having nobody and going to these, psyching myself and going to these meetups from that website meetup. And, they were all horrible, and I don't think I made a single connection from any of them. And it kind of solidified how much I didn't really fit in here. But it did get me out of the house, and it did get me talking to people. And I think we could do that in a sense, speed conversations, get to know someone other than your own little circle. But no, I'd love to do it. Maybe, in the near future when when there's something like that around, I'd go and do it.
You hit on something really interesting, I think, there. And this would be challenging I'm thinking particularly of straight males here. Because we've been talking about romantic relationships, but everyone rightly talks about how hard it is to make new friends as an adult.
Oh my God, it's the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do on a sort of personal level, at least in recent times, is coming to that realization that I am alone in this big, scary, very white, very Christian, very conservative kind of place, very straight. And coming to that realization of, well, it's up to me, because it's not going to come to me. I'm not going to be sitting on my couch watching freaking Stranger Things on Netflix and have people knock on my door going, hey, we're the neighborhood welcoming committee for queers and freaks and geeks. We want to, be your friend. That's not going to happen. So you do have to go out and kind of do it yourself. And it's incredibly hard and incredibly challenging. And I think it's partly because we put so much emphasis on. Oh, am I there? Am I back?
Yeah, sorry, you were.
Hello?
It's one of those things with a slight delay. At the point I decided to say you dropped out, you were actually there. So it's Australia's internet, ladies and gentlemen.
It is. And I'm testing out the new thingy. I can hear in my ears that it's still doing that wow thing every time I start to speak. So
from my perspective, it isn't so much. So maybe it is better.
Okay.
So
we'll check when we check it out again. But
yeah.
I think what I need to do is figure out that my new computer with the new camera, and then this, because I think part of the delay is this shitty old computer that I've had for sort of, gosh, probably longer than I've lived up here. But it's just because it's got that camera bit there, whereas the other one's got it down there, and it just looks like my nose, and it's all about looking hot on camera for me.
Yeah. No, angles are important
most of the time as well, but yeah.
Angles are. But I was thinking that idea of speed conversation, and because it could be both. It could be part of dating, but I think we get a big challenge because a lot of straight guys are really uptight. If it was a mix of people, if it was like straight, gay, bi, men, women, and it was just speed conversation, and that could be an interesting challenge to, who are you connecting with on what level? Wow,
Isn't there like an ad on telly at the moment for, oh God, I can't even remember who it is. It's probably some horrible, major corporation that, has stocks in, American concentration camps and horrible things like that. But there's an ad with two very, very different people. There's like a non-binary person on one couch and a, big burly Maori or something on another couch, and they're talking to each other with a curtain up or a screen up, sort of talking about each other's likes and dislikes or whatever. And then I think one of the questions is, do you think everybody should be the same? It's totally wanky, but it's a little bit, bright and nice in one way. And then, no, everybody should be different. And then they come together and you see who you've been talking to. And, and that's quite nice sort of little, it's very tokenistic. And I'm sure it's sort of, very surface level, because most corporations are pretty nasty to people that aren't sort of, your straight white heterosexual kind of consumer. But it was nice, and it did make me go, oh, that's oh, sweet. I'm not going to sign up to whatever company it is, but just making that effort to sort of it's like that ad recently that Gillette did with the trans boy shaving, and there are some lovely kind of things out there, but yeah, I like that idea of sort of bringing together a bunch of people that wouldn't normally sit down in a room together and converse, and have them have a conversation, whether you could do it in a speed dating way, whether we'd need to, you'd need to make it actually like a kind of, an event or a fringe show or something, it could be an interesting experiment. If I ever move back to Melbourne, we'll set it up. Anyone want to give us a grant to do it, and I'll move back to Melbourne and do it.
I love this idea, and we've got to write this down somewhere, because I think the scope for it is amazing. The different things of actually challenging people to have a conversation, and like I said, and just knowing it's a mix of people, that you'll be talking to men and women, you'll be talking to people who are maybe interested in dating and people who aren't, you may be talking to straight, gay, bi, whatever, and but so the challenge each time is to have a conversation. Man, I reckon there's legs. I was not expecting something like this to come out of this. This is why I like talking to you.
We'll make some plans. You know what I saw the other day? Well, actually, not the other day. It's a few months ago now, but I was so like, oh my God, this is what I wanted to do. And it's something that I still might do, but I'm not sure now with copyright legalities how I could do it. But there's a show on in America, I think it's like a stage show, and they did a little mini doco on Netflix, which is what I saw, called Mortified, where people get up on stage and read out sections of their old high school diaries or letters that they wrote or received. And like, it is incredibly embarrassing and absolutely mortifying, which is why it's called Mortified. But it's also really, from watching it and seeing the people read out their pieces, really quite cathartic in a way, and therapeutic, and sort of purging yourself of the things. There was this great one with this guy who's so obviously very, very gay, but convincing himself through his teenage diary that he's straight, he's hanging out with, it's not a crush, it's all just a platonic friendship. And it's hilarious because him looking back as sort of a 30 or however old he is, reading it back from when he was 15, you can so it's bloody brilliant. And I've got these old diaries from my high school times, which I talk about quite a lot in my blogs and on Twitter and things, where there's so much stuff about how when I was younger, I was going to grow up to be a hooker, and I was going to have all the sex, and I was going to have, and then all the horrible, nasty, bitchy things I'd say about the people in my classroom, because they were all horrible and bitchy people. But I would love to do something with it in a sort of sense of, I used it in a series of tweets and blogs that I did when there was the no little girl movement, which basically was, oh, no little girl wants to grow up to be a hooker, and therefore the industry is terrible and we should close it down. That was kind of the basic premise of it. And it was like, well, and almost every sex worker and bunch of other people who aren't even sex workers went, well, actually, we all thought about it. Still not all of us, but some of us did. Some of us wanted to, some of us were curious, and a lot of us grew up to be it. And I have this actual literal diary entry of me, and I think it's a 1991 diary, so I'm about 13 or 14 or something, and it's this just whole big thing about how I'm going to grow up and be a hooker. And I would love to read that out or do something with that, because I think and get other people to do sort of similar with their sort of, the things that they think that kids don't think about, because I think it's really important, like we were saying with the anti-porn thing a while ago, when people use children to try and ban things that aren't have anything to do with children. Well, fine, we'll give you a child's voice. It's just ours when we were kids, and we're going to you know, show you that you're completely wrong about the way that children think about things. Yeah. Anyway, that's totally off tangent. You know.
But brilliant, brilliant,
Well, you
brilliant
know,
concepts.
I'd love to. I'd love to. This is one of the things that I hate about living up here is the few very creative ideas and projects that I would love to work on have come to me sitting here in my beautiful house surrounded by palm trees and, you know, stones throw from the ocean. And, you know, it's whale season at the moment, so we can head down to the beach and watch the whales pass. And, oh, it's lovely. But, you know, everything's just sort of sitting in my ideas bin off to the side, never to be done, because there's nobody up here to help me work on them. So somebody send us a grant and I'll come home.
Maybe we can do a fringe festival show. I mean,
I would love to do something like that. I think it would be so much fun.
I mean, we both know pretty amazing people who
Yeah,
could
that's true.
be in to just get a few people monologuing stuff and having conversations. I mean, I was just thinking, like, it's funny, you know, the idea of like, oh, we're talking about advice to give people, and I'm freely admitting I suck at dating. Like when I was dating, I was like, you know, messaging people, oh, is this okay? Is this okay if we go here? Because I'm really self-conscious about the idea of being a domineering man and saying, hey lady, we're going here, we're doing this.
Let me look
I
after
want to
you,
know if it's
little lady.
convenient. I want, well, like, is the city convenient for you? Do you work or live anywhere near the city? And so I think I often come across as indecisive, but by some,
It's such a fine line. It's so tricky to sort of, you know, figure out how to talk to people in general.
it's like, daddy's gonna set all the rules here. But I mean, I made you snort.
Just you referring to yourself as daddy just did something to my brain.
I know it's all kinds of wrong, isn't it? But
Oh, I
um,
love it.
the look, as a classic example, why Mrs. Angry decided to give me a chance, I don't know, because without word of a lie, when it was our first, well, our first, you know, quote unquote date through the thing was meeting at a coffee shop to talk and say hello to see if we could deal with each other, and that was okay, although she wasn't shy about years down the track telling me dumb shit I did in that conversation. But then I thought, a date. Okay, I had some movie tickets. Okay, let's have a date. This is like our first romantic date to the movies. Classic romantic date to the movie Hotel Rwanda, which is a movie
Oh.
about the genocide in Rwanda.
I am not laughing at genocide. I am
No, you're
laughing at your
laughing at me
very,
doing that as
very poor
who
choice.
in their right mind takes a date, a first date to a movie about a genocide. What the fuck? Like, I want to meet Don Cheadle. Well, I want to meet Don Cheadle one day because he's amazing. But I want to meet Don Cheadle one day and just say to him, hey, you know, I went on a first date to your movie, Hotel Rwanda, because I can just imagine the look in his eyes like, what the fuck is wrong?
And then you'd be like, hey, here we are 13 years later.
Yeah.
Still together. I'm not
So,
sure what's more worrying. No, I love it.
but it's just like that's how bad my choices are with dating. So, you know, thank God someone took pity on me, I think is what I'm looking at here. But
Okay.
yeah, so I guess I'd also throw that out there as saying, like, if you feel like you're shit at dating, that doesn't mean you're not going to find the right person, because I think I suck at
Yeah,
dating.
yeah. Hey, I'm going to do a little plug here at the moment. It's not for
Yes.
me, it's for a friend, and this is completely out of the blue, but just the way that we're talking about dating.
Mhm.
My beautiful, beautiful friend Georgie, who's an amazing writer and sex worker and just excellent an advice giver about relationships,
Mm.
has written a book which is coming out in September called The Art of the Hookup, and it is so good. Like it is, I'm so proud of her for doing this. It's basically a book on dating and hooking up and how to get the best out of your hookups. So look out for that, and also look out for her. She does hookup education classes, like how to have a successful hookup at the now I think it's called the Laneway Learning in Flinders Lane in Melbourne. I think that's what they call it. It's like these independent kind of classes that people can run and do, and there's a whole bunch of cool stuff that happens there. But I know she runs the Art of the Hookup things. But I've read bits of this book, and I'm hoping I can make it down for the launch. But I don't think I'm going to be able to. But if you guys out there in single land or hookup land want a bit of good, excellent, no shit, no beating around the bush advice on hooking up and dating, then yeah, The Art of the Hookup by Georgie Wolfe is what you should be on. And she's got a podcast too.
And she's got a website, artofthehookup.com.
Yes.
I just looked that up.
Yes. She spent the last week, I think, building that and making it up properly, or at least she'd spent last weekend tinkering on it. And she's wonderful. And she also writes for us at Adult Matchmaker. She's got 1 or 2 pieces up at the moment, and we'll be doing more. So yeah, she's excellent, and she has no idea I'm saying this. So this is my proof to see if she watches this.
Well, that's interesting. Maybe we should get her on. I'm looking at the website. She's got a free ebook called "How to Do Consent Like a Fucking Pro." And
she's so good. I really rate them so much, and I think that I reckon if we could get Georgie on one of these episodes, she'd love it. Yeah, I did an episode of her podcast a while ago. I'm not sure. I don't think it's been released yet because she's sort of similar in the way that we sort of are backing ours up before we're sort of releasing them as a regular thing. But she was sort of pre-recording them.
Okay.
So that was really, that was fun. But yeah, definitely check her out.
Okay. Well, that's a good resource people can check out. I like that. I was thinking, like, we've fortunately moved back into slightly lighter territory. Not that the heavier, darker stuff we were talking about isn't important.
No, true. And I didn't mean it to go quite dark, but at the same time, sometimes the conversations just that's where they go. And I think they're important conversations to have. But it is nice to be able to frame it in a few laughs and a few ideas about other things. How heavy and dark is important, but an hour of it might not be great.
Yeah. Not shying away from the fact that sometimes there are dark and heavy stuff we need to talk about. We need to be honest about. We need to be open about. But it doesn't hurt to, like, because sex and relationships are heavy, and there's all sorts of things you have to deal with. But sex and relationships are also funny and stupid and weird and silly as well.
Yeah, they really are. And I think, and we don't tend to look at that at all. We look at this sort of very romanticized idea of relationships, and we forget that it's, for the most part, it's just two people sharing life together, and life is quite absurd, and so absurd and crazy things happen. And sometimes, if we have this very romanticized view of relationships, so when it doesn't suddenly isn't all sunshine and roses and that kind of honeymoon period as well, people go, oh, my relationship's over. They just shift and they change. But yeah, I think there are so many sides and aspects to it that we should cover them all. But the silly side of it's my expertise.
Yeah, it's pretty much, if you can't laugh in a relationship, it's probably not a particularly healthy relationship.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And to laugh at your relationship, not just in it, but at it. I think, and being able to laugh at yourself and at the absurdity of the things that you would do with or around your partner that you wouldn't do around anyone else, and there's that sort of, familiarity is quite nice, but at the same time it can breed complacency and this is a whole nother hour's conversation. Let's
it's kind of like if you've never laughed during sex, or you've never laughed at something that happened during sex, you're probably not having very interesting sex.
Yes. I think one of my very first pieces I wrote for Matchmaker when I first started as a regular contributor to them, like I'd been doing reviews and a few bit pieces sort of here and there, but when I first started the run of sort of the last 8 or 9 years or however long it's been that I've been writing for them now, the first one was about how absurd and ridiculous sex was, and that if we've got to laugh at it because it looks funny, it sounds funny, it smells funny, it's funny, and you should be able to laugh at the ridiculousness of genitals and wobbles and sweat and O face and elbows getting in the way and all the queefing and the slapping of skin and the slipping into the wrong bit and doing that. It's just, sex is hilarious. And yeah, we should all do it more often, but we should all laugh at it more often as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where on one level you think I shouldn't analyze this too much because if you really deconstruct sex, it's just absurdly silly. But that's the reason you should deconstruct it because it's absurdly silly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it will takes away a lot of that kind of that bullshit shame and paranoia and fear, and I guess the hatred of sex and sexual people. You know, if most people that have good sex find the idea that sex is a sin quite laughable, because they're like, well, okay, if it's a
Yeah.
sin, good-o.
Yeah, I
Feels
mean, when you
good.
get people, like the Dalai Lama literally basically saying sex with the lights on is a sin. And it's like, okay, buddy, good.
Sex with the lights on is just a bit unattractive, I think. I don't. I wrote this article about how to feel sexy and confident in the bedroom if you've got bigger, you're a bigger person. And in the piece I wrote that I'd been reading a lot of pieces about this to sort of see what other people were saying. And one of the tips was to start instilling body confidence. Have sex with the lights on and learn to love your body. And I'm like, mate, I've been told I have the body of like a supermodel in some situations, and even I don't want to have sex with the lights on because it's gross to see. I mean, it's not gross. Bodies are gross, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not. Sex is just funny looking. And the last thing that you want to do to instill confidence in yourself, if you don't have a lot of it, is to watch yourself being or having, being fucked or fucking someone or whatever, because it's just not attractive. It's like Russell Howard says in his Recalibrate special, which is one of my favorite Netflix stand-ups, and he's talking about sex and sex education. And he's like, if you do film porn, you just never ever watch it back. And it's so true. We are not professionals when you've got your iPhone sat on the counter, and it's very sexy to do, but not particularly sexy to watch back.
It's like this 70s thing of mirrors on the bedroom ceiling.
Yeah.
I
All
really,
I ever used to think was, so I'm just seeing this hairy guy's butt kind of like when I'm lying there. I cannot. Yeah, and then just the whole thing of, but for the guys, and they get to see the woman if it's in doggy. I'm like, yeah, but you'd be having sex with your neck up. You'd turn out like the busker in that Paul Jennings story. I don't know if anyone, if I'm just too old and no one else, but his head permanently kind of reached up because he's stuck down the well, constantly looking up. Like, it just seems so unconducive to good sex and comfort. Yeah.
Billy Connolly has a whole routine about why that's a terrible idea. Because he said he had a hotel room somewhere as mirrors on the city, but he was like on the bottom looking up, and that's supposed to be sexy. And he just looked up and he goes, "Gravity is doing its terrible work." And putting our face down, and he's just going like, "It was the worst.
Yeah.
It was." Everyone has always said that's really sexy, and I had it once and go, "No, I'm here to tell you, it's the worst."
Yeah, to me, it's the same as a massaging bed that sort of shakes while you're on it. Like, I just think that would be so distracting. And so, like, I'd put it on just to have fun and jump on the bed and be like, wee, massaging bed. But to actually have sex on a bed that's shaking like that, I can't think of anything worse, because I know I use vibrators and I get that, but that's on a very kind of specific area, like a quite sort of, pinpoint on one bit, not your whole, like, if that was going on while I'm trying, like, it's just, I don't get it. And I want to know who thought that was going to be, like, who invented that? Because it's not just like a
A
thing of,
dude invented that.
yeah, I know it did, but surely, does that feel good to you?
No, the idea is that women like it, and there's because guys don't. Guys come up with the dumbest shit. Well, chicks are really gonna dig this, and it's like, yeah, no, dude. Although there was something, Don Draper's wife getting off on a washing machine. Did you ever watch Mad Men?
I've never watched Mad Men, but I do know the scene, and I do know the thought of getting off on a washing machine,
Yeah.
and that's never. I've had washing machines that have, and I've never thought about sitting on it, because I can't think of anything worse than your whole body jerking around. Like,
Yeah.
I would rather sit on a an Xbox controller and just constantly run into Mario into the wall or something and have that vibrate. That's something I learned recently that people have done. We're talking about, articles. When we were talking this morning, we were saying about articles I'd recently written. One of them was about the weird and wonderful things that people have used as sex toys that aren't sex toys. And Xbox game controllers vibrating.
Game controllers. That's good. Yeah, and so It's a Me Mario becomes like a sexual trigger for you. You get horny if someone does a Mario impression.
Oh my God. I had with one guy, completely unrelated, but just that trigger thing. I had a guy in high school once say to the class, I think it was in science, it might have even been in sex ed, that he masturbated so often in the shower that he'd get a hard on every time it rained. And that has stuck with me for like 30 years in my head going, I wonder if would that
Is that
happen
serious? Yeah.
if you kept, like, because I know that there are sexual triggers and I know that certain things from childhood can definitely create sexual triggers that happen later on in life and that can become fetishes or fantasies or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered about that.
Oh God, I remember a friend of mine from college at this thing. He said that clearly wasn't true. Like, he should have been a stand-up comedian. Was he? He's saying like, oh, when you're having sex and you're trying to think of awful things to not come at the critical point, and you're going like, so I'm thinking of car crashes, horrible mutilated bodies. Don't do it. So now car crashes turn me on. So I'm worried I'm going to end up on busy intersections throwing oil on the road and getting my dick out. Waiting, come on.
but that's kind of, that's actually interesting, because there is that whole, I mean, I watch a lot of serial killer TV, and there's that whole thing that, and I'm sure it's not totally correct, but the FBI profilers and behavioral scientists and whatever are always saying, that escalation of from the feeling they got from mutilating a little mouse to mutilating this, that's sort of escalating into mutilating humans and stuff. It could be a very sex is quite a big and the climax of sex can be quite a big motivator for people. So, and I do know people who have got interesting sexual triggers that have stemmed from traumatic situations or things that happened to them as children, or situations that they found themselves in as a young person that they didn't quite understand, or whatever it is. And I'm not even talking about abusive situations. I'm just talking about, like, one guy I interviewed once was telling me about his nail polish fetish, specifically on toes, and mostly watching people paint toes. And that was from being hiding in his sister's closet as a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old or something, watching his sister and her friends paint their toenails. And he didn't think anything of it at the time, but as he grew older and started to kind of masturbate and fantasize, that was an image that would come into his head quite a bit, just that sort of would come up. And now, as a 40-year-old man, the nail polish and watching people polish their toes is this intense kind of sexual trigger for him. And that's from this one sort of small incident that he just sort of hid in this closet. So, you never know. I hope your friend doesn't end up putting oil in the middle of roads. But
yeah. No, a real one for me. I'm a non-smoker, and I've only had a sexual relationship with a smoker once. This is ages ago in my 20s. And whether smokers realize it or not, they smell a particular way, and it's not the residual smoke on them. It, like, gets into your system, and your skin smell. Smokers' skin smells a particular way, and I started to associate this smell with the person I was having sex with. And I found myself one time going home from work, like commuting on a train platform, and there was a dude next to me who was a smoker who had this same smell. And I was conscious, I was going like, that's making me think of sex. Weird.
Yeah, wow. So that's why you like me so much, because I smoke far too many cigarettes that's healthy. I mean, one cigarette's not healthy, but yeah, I chain smoke sometimes. So wow. That's why we've got this bond. I've always wondered.
I don't know, that may have been a precipitation in ending that relationship if I'm going to get sexually attracted to random dudes on train platforms.
True.
This is not great. This is not great.
Oh, funny.
I think, look, that's as good while we're talking about weird, silly stuff, that's as good a place as any to leave this particular conversation.
I like it. This has been a really interesting episode. We have really sort of, gone on the
It was a roller
wave of.
coaster.
Yeah, it has been, and I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. And I think
We didn't
that's
really have a plan going into it, so I think we've done
no.
well.
And yeah, a peek behind the curtain for anyone watching or listening to this. The marginal plan we had, we didn't touch at all. Actually, we just went off on a tangent, and that's why. This is why I want to have conversations with people I know and people I know who are good talkers, because the conversations are always going to be good, even if they're not what we expect.
What we were talking about in the first place.
Well, I
I
was
love
thinking
it.
about guys who are too homophobic to wipe their butts.
I
We'll
know, and we
talk
didn't
about that
even
another
touch
time.
that. Like, pardon the
No,
pun.
we
Maybe
didn't even
next
mention it.
time.
We will. Look, if you've been intrigued by this conversation, come back. We'll talk about another day guys too homophobic to wipe their butts because they think going between the butt cheeks is gay. My God.
It's like guys that won't eat like a hot dog or a banana or something, and I've heard
Yeah,
similar.
no, they'll slice it up. They won't eat a whole
Yeah.
one. They've got to chop it up into little bits.
How exhausting. But we'll leave that for another time.
People's paranoias and uptight phobias are very exhausting. Yes, but we'll leave that for another time. We'll bid you wonderful people farewell. Hope
Thank
you've got
you for
something out of it.
listening.
Yeah, and we hope to have you join us again sometime soon. But bye for now.
Bye for now.
And I'll also that's where the podcast's going to cut out.
Righto.
We're still live. I'm going to say bye to anyone who's still.
Is
watching
anyone there?
live.
We got any good comments?
I have to huge hat tip to Charlie, who's a regular in.
Hi, Charlie.
I actually don't know if Charlie's male or female. I know Charlie's bi. But Charlie Litton said,
Can Charlie not sit in a chair either?
yeah, no, the line was actually, that's me, can't sit straight, can only sit bi.
Yeah.
And with massive hat tip to Charlie for that line. That's a great one. But yeah, thanks everyone who came to actually be part of it live. And we'll be doing. Okay, I thought you were female, Charlie, but I blanked and I just literally. Charlie just updated and said she's female. I didn't want to make a presumptuous because that's a hilarious thing. I've got I have a bunch of diverse friends, particularly on Facebook. I've got a bunch of friends who are trans, and every now and then they'll, when I'm interacting with them, they say something like, "Oh, like you're not like treating me like I'm trans." Okay, dude, or I don't even know. It's not something that's important to me. You and your life and your identity is not something that I measure against us being like online friends. We're just friends. We're interacting. Like I forget how many people I'm now friends with online are trans or are gay or are bi, because that's not the central part. It's like we're just friends.
It's an interesting thing that sort of, I used to, and my best friend is trans, and some of my closest friends are trans and non-binary. There's almost, the majority, I would say now, and I don't know if that just sort of says anything about me just not wanting to be around cishet people because they're just so fucking. But no, I think. Used to be all, I don't see color and I don't see sexuality and I don't see it. And I'm like, now I've realized that I think I need to see it. We all need to see it so that we can get to the stage where we really don't see it. But the people, and it's that thing of the people that can't see color or can't see sexuality, they're people who are coming from an extreme place of privilege of, and it's just like, well, you might not see color, but that's because the world has been colored in for you.
Yeah. Oh, and that's an important thing to know. When I say I don't put a lot of thought into how many of my.
I know, and I wasn't meaning you.
No,
either.
I know you were. I know you weren't. Yeah. I definitely that don't see color thing is bullshit. And
it's still saying we're live.
Oh yeah, no, we are. We're still live. This.
And, we're just. Right, of course. Yeah.
Aaron piped up and said she found this live. He found this live podcast. He follows you on Twitter, and it's the first time he's seen us do this live. And he's going, "This is awesome. Do it more." So
who's that?
Aaron H.
Aaron H.
H says he follows you on Twitter, and that's how he found out we were doing this, and really enjoyed it, which is good. But
hi, Aaron.
There's a big difference between me saying I don't spend a lot of time obsessing over which of my internet friends are trans and saying I don't see sexuality. No, I see sexuality. I see race. I see, and I respect other people's.
Oh, hang on. I just turned on YouTube on my phone and I can hear you talking, and it just suddenly went because I'm trying to see if I can see the comments.
We'll be there on YouTube.
We're not recording. We're still live, but we're not actually. Yeah, all good.
It
Oh, my
won't.
hair
It won't
looks
be the
awesome.
podcast, but still.
Look at that. It's so bright. I
Yeah.
just re-dyed it today, so it's
Yes.
looking
Yes.
good.
I saw you post that online, but your hair does look particularly good today.
It
But
does.
yeah,
And
look.
it's so funny because that color that you can see on the screen right now, that
Yeah.
bright blue,
Yeah.
that's not what it looks like. It's actually green.
Well, that's what I said with my drink when I was holding my drink, and I agree. It's gone now, but I agree that you said it looked like toilet water.
Yeah.
But it was it was sort of ground, and it looked a bit green. It was weird. Oh, Aaron is Ash Brand on Twitter. There you go.
Oh, Ash. Oh, I
There
know
we go.
who you. There,
Yeah.
cool.
All right, so I think we will
Anyway,
say goodbye to the fine folk on YouTube now. We'll stop being live. We'll be back
bye.
again next weekend, all things being equal, because we both really enjoy doing this, and we're glad you folks enjoy watching it. We'll see you again later.
We'll see you
Bye.
again. Mwah. Bye.
And